We have former Huckabee Campaign's Communications Director, Hogan Gidley, our senior political editor, Steve Chigueras, and CBSN political contributor, Linda Tran. She's also a founding partner of 270 Strategies. We should disclose, several employees at 270 Strategies do some work for the Hillary Clinton campaign. However, Linda does not. She's here instead, informing you. So, to it we get. And, you know, Steve, that was, we broke out the archives there. The Pat Boone calls 40 years ago, the last time we had a contested convention. Interestingly,
I wonder how many delegates were swayed by those calls.
Right? If John Wayne called, I don't know. Maybe I'd listen. But, you know, Ted Cruz just a month ago was saying, oh, a contested convention is the great hope of the Republican establishment. It is now also the great hope of Ted Cruz. The chaos that figures to ensue in Cleveland at this point is what?
Well, we'll have to see what happens. I mean, there's a terrible gray area that they're going to be likely faced with in on June 7th if Trump doesn't clinch the nomination. Now, let's keep in mind his win last night, and I think wins next week will get him closer to 1237. What happens in terms of the campaign at that point? Is there going to be some sort of groundswell of support for Trump? You know, Trump is toning things down. Yeah. He's putting together a more professional operation. Do voters react to that moving forward, and does he get to 1237? If he doesn't, we're probably in a scenario where he's just short. And what happens in that scenario? Is it all of a sudden they're going to just nothing's going to happen from June 7th until July 18th? They walk into the convention and it's chaos? Or is there going to be an effort to try to close the gap on Trump's part by talking to unpledged delegates and getting to 1237, wooing unpledged delegates and hitting that number? Or will there be some deals made? Do Republicans overall want to see chaos at the convention? Yeah. That's a question we're going to have to ask a lot and find out of the delegates, of the RNC, people who are involved in the RNC. Do they want that week in July to be just complete chaos, or do they want it to go smoothly? And would it go to the guy who got more delegates, one more states, and one more popular vote, even if he doesn't clinch on June 7th?
This is somebody who has openly bragged about exploiting the loopholes in terms of, let's say, his hiring practices that he would say I would close if I was president. He's now the person saying this is a crooked, rigged system, but also with the reorganization of his campaign staff, the hiring of Paul Manafort, it is clearly a game and a system he is willing to play and participate in. Hogan, what to make of it then? You know, his willingness, even as he rails against it, to participate in it?
Well, there are basically two campaigns here, right? One is running for president, and the other is the undercurrent campaign, if you will, to try and secure those delegates so that you can actually become the nominee. This is the kind of stuff that the establishment loves because they usually have the infrastructure, the knowledge, the know-how to actually accomplish these things. That's why people like Huckabee couldn't quite get over the hump back in 2008. Santorum, we had a tough time in 2012 because we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the money to go out and talk to all these delegates to get the rallying cry behind them. Typically what happens is someone, you know, has enough votes and they go on and win the nomination, and we don't have to worry about this. It is fascinating now that we're seeing on both sides some of the same delegate wrangling that went on decades and decades ago to try and secure this nomination. It's no doubt Cruz cannot win the nomination with delegates you know, through these primaries, but he can stop Trump by siphoning off just enough. The interesting part for me is actually when you get to the convention. If Cruz were to go to a second ballot, there's no guarantee that he gets the votes either. How many ballots does this take to actually secure a nomination for any one person? Because if Trump is up by several hundred, are all those 100 going to defect to Cruz? I doubt it.
But also, and you have the numbers that suggest that if we get to a second, third ballot, and everybody can sort of, let's now suddenly wipe the slate clean. If they want to win in the fall, it suggests that John Kasich is the man they should all marshal behind.
Right, but I mean, he can't win enough votes to win any state but his own home state. And then also, you know, it remains to be seen if he even can be submitted for nomination because of the 40B rule. Yep. How are they going to change that? Are they going to change that when those 121 people meet on the Rules Committee a couple of days before? Are they going to have the guts to change that rule? And if they change the rule, does it overtly help or protect an establishment candidate like John Kasich or now to some degree Ted Cruz? If that happens, I just think there's going to be complete chaos.
Linda, the mindset, meanwhile, of a delegate, obviously they, as Hogan mentioned, they might be empowered in a way in both places, but certainly let's just look at Cleveland, for instance. New York exit polls show that the majority of voters feel that whoever has the most votes should get that nomination. Is there a sense philosophically that delegates have going in that I'm going to listen to the will of the people, even though I could I could participate in the chaos?
Well, so on the Democratic side, it depends on whether you're talking about those pledged delegates or the super delegates. And historically, pledged delegates really do go with the will of the people in their states. I don't think that that's going to change this go round. The flip side of that, though, is the super delegates who also get allocated as part of each of these primary elections. They're really free to vote whichever way they want to. A majority of them, as you know, have already come out saying that they support Hillary Clinton. And it's just very unlikely that those who have declared who they support, even if they're a superdelegate, are going to change their minds. Keep in mind, in 2008, even when Barack Obama was able to turn some of those folks who had pledged their support for Hillary Clinton, it was never more than 24. With Bernie Sanders now being behind several hundred on both the pledged delegate side and the superdelegate side, the math is just virtually impossible.
And Obama was winning.
And Obama was winning.
He still couldn't get but 12 to flip.
Still, though, promising that he's going to take this to the floor in Philadelphia. Is there real concern? I mean, this is something that has dogged the Republicans now for a few months, at least. Talk of a contested convention and party unity. Is there real concern for the Democrats now in terms of unity?
I don't think there's real concern the way that you're seeing it in the Republican Party. I think part of the reason why it's so concerning on the Republican side is because there's a possibility that this could be an all-out brawl on the floor. On the Democratic side, it's just very unlikely. You have to remind people that those superdelegates are strong party stalwarts. Bill Clinton is one of them. They are former governors. They are sitting members of Congress who have already endorsed Hillary Clinton. It's just unlikely that anything's going to come of any sort of a fight. That said, Bernie Sanders supporters are up in arms, and they're very fired up about this. In fact, some supporters have set up a website that lists the personal information of all the delegates that they know. And anecdotally, I've heard from some of these folks that they are getting bombarded with phone calls and emails. And Bernie Sanders himself is, of course, making calls to folks as well. You got to question whether it's a really effective strategy to have, your legions yelling at these superdelegates that you actually want to woo. So I think that's going to be a problem.
I have to say goodbye, but quickly, Steve. The Giuliana's piece, the optics, if nothing else, considering the import that the importance of the delegates, it's certainly in Cleveland will play. There's some loopholes apparently we need to close. Yes.
Maybe.
I
mean, paying these guys off,
or maybe
Pat Boone
not.
phone calls. But we'll see what happens when we get there. Again, let's remember that between June 7th, when the primaries end, and July 18th, so that's 40 days. A lot can happen those 40 days. And if Trump is close enough, there's going to be a lot of debate. There's going to be a lot of dealing, whether it's wooing delegates or whether it's just trying to get him over the top, or completely derail him. We'll see what happens, but it's going to be that 40-day period is going to be insane and fun to watch.
We're going to be wedging all of you then onto the set each and every day to discuss it. Although I hear watch a trip with Jake's across the street there with Steve. From what I'm told.
That's the second bar reference you've made.
I'm breaking news. It's been that sort of day.
It's been a weed story,
Already.
2 bar stories. Yeah.
Well, this 420 stuff, that's all anecdote. I mean, from my copious research has suggested. Steve, Linda Hogan, respectively. Thanks.